Welcome back to the deep dive. You've handed us a blueprint today, a set of sources charting the history of a company that is arguably the perfect microcosm of modern biotechnology, Biogen Inc.
It really is.
This is a story of incredible, Nobel Prize level scientific ambition juxtaposed with operational risk and, frankly, ethical turbulence that few companies can match.
That's the core tension right there, isn't it? The thing we really need to explore. Biogen is an American multinational biotech titan, but its specialization is intensely focused on one of the most challenging areas in all of medicine.
Neurological diseases.
Exactly. Neurological diseases. We're talking about MS, Alzheimer's, ALS, and then these rare conditions like spinal muscular atrophy. These are just devastating, chronic, and historically untreatable diseases.
And that desperation for a cure is the high-stakes environment Biogen operates in. Our sources track its journey from a 1978 startup, Biotechnology, Geneva, I believe.
That's right.
All the way to an S&P 500 powerhouse. Our mission here is to understand the mechanics of that evolution, how they achieved market dominance in certain areas, and critically, how they handled the massive controversies that inevitably come with such high-risk science.
Especially the big one?
Oh yeah, the decade-long saga of their abandoned Alzheimer's drug, Aducanumab.
But before we get there, we have to establish the sheer scale and the institutional gravity of this player. When you hear the name Biogen, you need to think beyond just a typical pharmaceutical firm.
Right.
You need to think institutional stability, even with all the internal turbulence we're going to talk about.
The international roots are fascinating, starting as Biotechnology Geneva in 1978. But their identity now is so firmly cemented in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Right in the heart of it all.
Yeah, right in the world's most concentrated biotech ecosystem.
And that geographic centering kind of belies its massive global financial reach. When we talk scale, we're talking about a company that, according to the 2024 financial reports, generated annual revenue of US $9.676 billion.
Wow, $9.6 billion.
And their total assets are reported at US $28.05 billion. This isn't just a successful company, this is a capital engine. It employs, 7,605 people as of 2024?
And it holds a solid spot on the NASDAQ 100, the S&P 500. It's number 424 on the Fortune 500 list.
So they have the financial muscle to take massive gambles, which, as we're about to see, they do. Frequently.
Okay, let's unpack this history, because the origin story of Biogen it's just remarkable. It doesn't start with venture capitalists, it starts with pure scientific pedigree.
That's the key.
The founding group in 1978 was a biological dream team. It was this intentional meeting of 5 of the era's most prominent research biologists.
It was a very conscious effort to translate pure academic discovery into commercial medicine. This was not typical startup fare, You had these leading lights from European and American institutions.
So who were they?
You had Kenneth Murray, a pioneer in gene sequencing from the University of Edinburgh, Philip Allen Sharp, a foundational geneticist from MIT, Heinz Schaller from the University of Heidelberg, and Charles Weissman from the University of Zurich.
And crucially, the CEO at the launch was a co-founder who was also a scientific giant himself.
That's Walter Gilbert from Harvard University. He stepped in as the initial CEO, which just cemented that immediate high-level scientific oversight. And it was Charles Weissman who provided the company's very first product.
Interferon alpha.
Interferon alpha, a key protein used in the immune response and really foundational for early viral treatments. This shows that direct link between the academic lab bench and the initial commercial pipeline.
And the company's foundational prestige was validated almost immediately. It's not often you hear that 2 of the company's founding scientists went on to win Nobel Prizes after the company was already up and running.
It just speaks volumes about the intellectual capital they were built on, right? Walter Gilbert was awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1980, recognized for his revolutionary understanding of DNA sequencing.
Okay.
Then, just over a decade later, Philip Allen Sharp shared the 1993 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for his groundbreaking discovery of split genes.
Which fundamentally changed how we understand genetic information.
Completely. That kind of legacy in foundational genetic and molecular science gives Biogen this unique, almost untouchable scientific credibility. It really underpins their ability to seek these highly ambitious, high-risk targets today.
So that deep scientific foundation really set the stage for their first major transformation, the 2003 merger.
The transition to Biogen IDEC was absolutely pivotal. They merged with IDC Pharmaceuticals, a San Diego-based company founded in 1985 by a different breed of expert.
Okay.
We're talking physicians, immunologists, cancer researchers, primarily from UC San Diego and Stanford. So this merger wasn't just about combining balance sheets, it was about combining technological platforms.
And the resulting entity instantly leaped up the global biotech rankings.
Instantly. Biogen Inc. immediately became the third largest biotechnology company in the world by market cap at the time.
And what did IDIC bring to the table?
They brought more than just a cancer pipeline. They brought Aducanumab, or rituximab. This was a revolutionary piece of science. The very first monoclonal antibody developed and approved for cancer treatment.
We need to pause on rituximab for a moment because simply saying it was the first AMI for cancer undersells its significance, doesn't it? Why was this such a foundational shift?
Well, because before monoclonal antibodies, the primary weapon against cancer was, non-selective chemotherapy.
Right, which just kills everything.
It kills rapidly dividing cells indiscriminately, leading to those awful side effects. RETUXAN represented the beginning of targeted therapy. As a monoclonal antibody, it was engineered to recognize and bind specifically to a protein CD20 found on the surface of B cells.
The cancer cell.
The ones that are often overexpressed in certain lymphomas. This allowed it to flag the cancerous cells for destruction by the immune system while sparing most healthy tissue. And that technology, targeted protein therapy, became central to Biogen's future work.
Concluding their later Alzheimer's strategy.
Exactly. So the I-to-C merger not only expanded their market, but it also diversified their technological expertise, preparing them for that next wave of biological engineering.
Yet they eventually shifted back to just Biogen in 2015.
Right. They dropped the IDEC. And that name change reflected a renewed and intensive focus. Following the merger, Biogen IDEC had this cancer portfolio, but the leadership decided that the highest value, least met medical need was in neurology.
So they streamlined.
Simplifying the name back to Biogen signaled a deliberate corporate strategy to shed non-core assets and to double down on complex neurological disorders, which would require massive, sustained R&D investment.
And that investment was quickly backed up by strategic acquisitions that really locked in their future therapeutic focus. Let's review those early moves that shaped their pipeline.
The post-merger consolidation phase was highly focused. In 2006, they acquired Conforma Therapeutics for $250 million, a cancer specialist.
Which seems a bit contradictory to the neurology focus.
It does, but it often involves overlapping molecular biology principles. More importantly, though, in the same year, they acquired Fumapharm AG.
And that Fumapharm acquisition was the critical foundation for their future MS dominance, wasn't it?
Absolutely, 100%. Fumapharm consolidated Biogen's ownership of the intellectual property around oral fumarate, known then as BG12.
Okay.
Fumarate compounds were being studied for both MS and psoriasis. This acquisition eliminated a competitor and guaranteed control over what would become Fumaderm, approved in Germany for psoriasis, and then Tecfidera, which later revolutionized the MS treatment landscape globally.
So that was a smart move.
That $250 million investment was a clear, calculated move to capture a major market segment.
What other moves were they making during this period to shore up their technical capabilities?
In 2007, they acquired Syntenix Pharmaceuticals for up to $120 million. Syntenix was focused on hemophilia B, but the true strategic value was the delivery technology.
Okay.
They acquired the technology for developing inhalable treatments, which is a crucial capability for a company that often deals with large molecule drugs that are, difficult to administer.
So these early strategic moves weren't just about drugs.
No, not at all. They were about securing delivery systems and pipelines that allowed them to tackle chronic, high-cost, and complex diseases efficiently.
Now we transition from the foundation to the financial engine. Biogen's portfolio is concentrated, and it's deeply rooted in multiple sclerosis, a condition where the immune system attacks the central nervous system.
And that concentration is significant. MS drugs alone constituted a dominant 45% of Biogen's 2024 total revenues.
45%.
And they intentionally offer a full spectrum of treatments. So for patients who prefer oral administration, there's Tecfidera, which is dimethyl fumarate, and the less frequent dosing option, Vumerity.
And they also maintain a strong presence in the older injectable market.
Correct. The older workhorses, like Avonex and Plegridy, still generate substantial revenue and provide options for patients who may not tolerate the oral treatments or who have been successfully managed on injectables for years.
A robust portfolio.
It ensures Biogen maintains market share across the entire MS patient population.
But within that highly successful portfolio is Tysabri, or natalizumab, a drug that forces the company to walk a very fine line between clinical benefit and a catastrophic side effect.
Tysabri is a classic example of high-efficacy, high-risk medicine. It's common in neurology. It's a monoclonal antibody that is highly effective at slowing MS progression, but it carries a serious, potentially fatal risk.
Progressive multifocal leukoencephalopathy, or PML.
PML, exactly. And the risks became very real in the market.
What happened?
In 2008, new cases of PML, which is a severe, debilitating viral infection of the brain, surfaced in Europe among Tysabri users. This triggered intense international regulatory concern and public alarm.
I can imagine.
But the data showed that Tysabri, for some patients, provided far superior clinical benefit compared to other options.
So the challenge for Biogen became, how do you manage a drug that is both life-changing and potentially life-threatening? And they answered by buying complete control.
They made an incredible strategic and financial commitment. In 2013, Biogen decided to eliminate the joint ownership and bought the full rights to Tysabri from their partner, Elan,
For how much?
for a whopping $3.25 billion.
Wow.
And that price tag, knowing the inherent liability and the ongoing need for strict risk management programs like regular screening, tells you everything you need to know about the drug's clinical superiority and its profit potential.
They were willing to shoulder the massive safety liability because the drug was just that effective for a subset of patients.
It was a calculated risk that it's paid off financially for them.
And to complete their MS picture, they also have Fampyra in the EU, which focuses purely on mobility.
Right. Fampyra addresses a very specific quality-of-life limiting symptom for EU MS patients, walking ability. And its regulatory path is really insightful. It was initially granted conditional marketing approval in 2011.
What does conditional mean in this case?
It's a high-stakes deal. It signals regulators believe the drug meets an urgent need, but requires the company to provide additional, usually long-term safety and benefit data after it's on the market.
And they good.
They met that burden, and they converted it to standard marketing approval in 2017. This just exemplifies the incremental, persistent development required even for symptomatic treatments.
Okay, so moving from the steady, massive revenue stream of MS, we shift to the truly rare disease breakthroughs, where the risk profile is different, but the clinical impact is arguably even more profound.
Definitely.
We're talking about spinal muscular atrophy, or SMA, and the drug Spinraza.
Spinraza, or nusinersen, is a landmark drug for Biogen and for patients. It accounted for a highly specialized 16.2% of their 2024 revenues.
And its approval in the U.S. in 2016 marked it as the first-ever treatment for SMA.
The first ever. It's a devastating genetic disorder that destroys motor nerve cells, leading to muscle wasting, mobility loss, and often early death.
To understand the impact, we need to understand the mechanism. How does Spinraza actually work to change the prognosis for these patients?
So it works by addressing the underlying genetic defect. SMA is caused by a mutation in the SMN1 gene. Now, humans have a backup gene, SMN2, which can produce a small amount of the necessary protein, but often not enough to prevent the disease from progressing.
And Spinraza boosts that backup gene.
Exactly. Spinraza is what's called an antisense oligonucleotide. Essentially, it's a short strand of synthetic DNA designed to bind to a specific sequence of that SMN2 gene, ensuring that the gene produces more full-length functional protein.
It doesn't cure the defect.
No, it doesn't cure it, but by boosting the protein, it significantly mitigates the severity of the disease.
This sounds like revolutionary precision medicine, but it comes with a price tag that has made Spinraza a global flashpoint for drug pricing ethics.
It absolutely ignited one of the most intense ethical pricing debates in recent memory. The price point was, well, astronomical. $750,000 for the first year of loading doses.
$750,000.
And then $375,000 every year thereafter, potentially for the rest of the patient's life.
That's unbelievable.
On one hand, you have the drug development cost, which was immense. The target population is small, and the drug provides demonstrable quality of life improvements. I mean, in infants, it can be the difference between life and respiratory failure.
But on the other hand, the idea of a lifelong, nearly $1 million annual commitment forces desperate families and healthcare systems into these impossible choices.
Precisely. It brings into sharp relief that tension between market economics and urgent medical necessity. Biogen argued the price was necessary to recoup the investment.
Of course.
However, for health systems and families, it represented a monumental financial burden that only served to highlight the vast profit margins inherent in orphan drug designation. It's a classic example of Biogen translating scientific success directly into market leverage.
And they're clearly committed to this rare niche strategy. We also see omaveloxolone, or Skyclarys, for Friedreich's ataxia, making up 4.0% of 2024 revenues.
That acquisition and launch just reinforces their strategy. Friedreich's ataxia is another progressive neurological disease. Skyclarys, approved in 2023, targets a rare high-impact condition, proving that Biogen is doubling down on areas where they can command high prices due to unmet need and limited competition.
We should also briefly note tofersen, or Qalsody, for ALS, another devastating condition with a huge unmet need, and the ongoing collaborations they rely on.
Their revenue diversification includes significant collaboration revenue, about 18.1% of their total, primarily through Genentech. And then there's a smaller but growing biosimilar segment at 8.2%.
So the business model is structured to use those stable, high-margin profits.
From MS and rare diseases, yes, to fund the next generation of riskier, cutting-edge R&D like their pursuit of Alzheimer's treatments.
Before we get to the main event, the Aduhelm saga, we have to analyze a very shrewd financial move, spinning off their hemophilia division.
This move in 2017 really defined their focus. Biogen spun off its hemophilia business, which included the drugs Alprolix and Eloctate, into a new, separate, publicly traded company called Bioverativ.
A powerful corporate signal.
A very powerful signal. It showed that while hemophilia was a profitable, successful franchise, it did not fit the extreme, high-risk neurological specialization Biogen had committed to.
And the market immediately validated that strategic spinoff.
Almost immediately, and it was highly profitable. Bioverativ was acquired by the French pharmaceutical giant Sanofi in 2018 for a staggering $11.6 billion.
$11.6 billion.
So Biogen successfully unlocked massive strategic value from assets that were considered non-core to their main mission, demonstrating expert management of their corporate portfolio and, freeing up capital for their next massive undertaking.
If Biogen's entire history is a calculation of risk versus reward, the story of Aducanumab, branded as Aduhelm, is the moment they rolled the dice on the biggest, most emotionally charged disease target in the world, Alzheimer's.
This is it.
This is the core narrative of modern high-stakes biotech.
This story just encapsulates the tension between scientific hope, regulatory pressure, and the desperate urgency of patients. Aducanumab was licensed early, way back in 2007, from Neurimmune, a scientific spin-off from the University of Zurich.
And the drug was based on the amyloid hypothesis.
Right. The premise that removing amyloid beta plaques from the brain would stop or slow cognitive decline.
And early results suggested that premise might actually work.
They provided enormous scientific justification for moving forward. By late 2014 and early 2015, initial studies showed significant promise. Not only did the drug achieve the biological goal of reducing amyloid beta plaques in the brain,
which is huge in itself.
Huge. But in early-stage patients, there were also reported, albeit small, improvements in cognition. This was revolutionary because no drug had ever definitively achieved both biological clearance and cognitive benefit at the same time.
This success propelled them immediately into the most expensive and complex stage of drug testing.
It demanded a massive commitment. In July 2015, Biogen initiated two monumental late-stage phase 3 studies, Engage and Emerge. They were designed to definitively assess the drug's effectiveness and safety.
And then the mechanism was confirmed in 2016.
Right. A high-profile report in the journal Nature validated the decrease of amyloid beta in the brains of patients receiving the treatment. The hope was sky high.
Yet, despite the massive investment and early hope, the journey hit a sudden dramatic wall in 2019.
March 21, 2019. That date is a perfect demonstration of the brutality of clinical trials. Biogen stunned the investment world by announcing that the phase 3 trials were being halted.
Why?
An independent data monitoring committee performed an interim analysis and concluded the trials were unlikely to meet their primary endpoint, a finding of futility.
So the drug, based on the statistical models, simply wasn't working.
That was the conclusion.
Biogen shares dropped sharply, the market priced the drug as a total failure, and the decade-long dream seemed dead. But the story took an unprecedented, stunning reversal just months later.
It was an extraordinary scientific and regulatory maneuver. In October 2019, Biogen performed a complete about-face. They announced plans to revive the drug and pursue FDA approval.
And their justification.
It was complex. They conducted a new analysis of a much larger patient pool that included more complete data. And they suggested that patients who received higher doses for longer durations in one of the trials, the eMERGE trial, did show promising results in slowing cognitive decline.
So they essentially found a positive signal hidden within the massive data set of the previously declared failure.
That's what they claim.
But knowing that the independent panel had declared futility, was this reversal driven purely by science, or was there intense market pressure to deliver something on their massive investment?
It's likely a blend of both, right? The high-stakes nature of the disease, the vastness of the untapped market, and the sheer cost of the Phase 3 program meant the pressure to find any positive signal was immense.
So the scientific basis was controversial from the start.
Highly controversial. It wasn't based on a new trial, but a retrospective reanalysis of a failed trial. But Biogen had enough confidence in that small positive signal to commit fully to commercial preparation.
And the commercial world reacted instantly, anticipating the drug's arrival.
Absolutely. Biogen doubled down on manufacturing. They accelerated construction on their state-of-the-art facility in Solothurn, Switzerland, alongside their North Carolina facility.
All designed to churn out this monoclonal antibody at scale.
And the investment community clearly bought into the revived hope. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway bought over $192 million worth of shares, a very strong signal of major investor confidence.
This set the stage for the final regulatory showdown, which became one of the most controversial FDA decisions in decades.
Biogen and their collaborator Eisai submitted the Biologics License Application, or BLA, in July 2020, and they requested the accelerated review pathway.
But the internal conflict at the FDA became public.
It did. In November 2020, the FDA Advisory Panel, these are the outside experts tasked with providing impartial review, voted overwhelmingly against approval. They expressed serious, deep-seated doubts about the clinical efficacy data from the reanalysis.
Yet, despite that strong advisory rejection, the FDA overruled its own panel.
On June 7, 2021, the FDA granted accelerated approval to Aducanumab under the brand name Aduhelm. And this decision was instantly polarizing because the FDA chose to disregard the unanimous skepticism of its expert committee.
What was the specific justification for overriding the panel and invoking that accelerated approval pathway?
This is where regulatory language becomes so critical. The FDA invoked the accelerated approval pathway, which is typically reserved for drugs treating serious conditions where there's no existing therapy. The key justification was that Aduhelm had been proven to reduce amyloid beta plaques in the brain.
Okay.
The FDA deemed this plaque reduction a surrogate endpoint, meaning it was likely to predict a clinical benefit to the patient.
So they traded certainty for speed.
Exactly. They recognized the urgency for Alzheimer's patients but lacked definitive proof of long-term cognitive improvement. And crucially, the approval came with a mandate.
Right.
Biogen had to conduct a required post-approval Phase 4 clinical trial to definitively verify the clinical benefit. If that trial failed, the drug could be taken off the market. It was a calculated regulatory gamble based on desperation.
But the commercial failure began almost immediately, starting with the staggering cost.
The initial pricing decision was commercially devastating. Biogen set the price at $56,000 per patient per year.
$56,000.
And this high cost, coupled with the profound controversy and the clinical ambiguity, it created a perfect commercial choke point.
Why did major insurers and the government balk at covering it?
Payers operate on cost-effectiveness data. Major insurers openly refused coverage, stating they would wait for definitive proof, the outcome of that mandatory Phase 4 trial, that the drug actually improved patient outcomes, not just reduced plaques.
And the U.S. government.
The U.S. government, through Medicare, did not subsidize the drug outside of approved clinical trials, which significantly limited immediate market access. With no guaranteed payment, hospitals were reluctant to stock it, and doctors faced immense administrative hurdles.
So the combination of clinical doubt and extreme cost effectively choked the drug's adoption.
Completely. So after a decade of research, billions invested, and the highest possible regulatory drama, the Aduhelm Odyssey reached its inevitable conclusion.
The end of the road.
It was. The financial realities became insurmountable. Facing negligible commercial uptake and the ongoing requirement for expensive follow-up trials, Biogen officially abandoned the drug in January 2024, citing financial reasons for the decision.
What a story.
The saga concluded as a monumental financial loss, a cautionary tale about accelerated approval, and a perfect example of the high-stakes, all-or-nothing nature of biotech.
So, Biogen emerged from the Aduhelm failure damaged but financially solvent. The job now was to refocus their massive financial muscle. Let's look at how they've been strategically pivoting and sharpening their assets through recent M&A.
The M&A strategy post-Aduhelm clearly indicates a pivot back to their strength: high-value, rare disease portfolios and specialized technology. In July 2023, they executed a major deal
Acquiring Reata Pharmaceuticals.
for nearly $6.5 billion. And Reata had Omavox alone, Skyclarys, which we discussed, for Friedreich's ataxia.
This acquisition wasn't about diversification, but consolidation,
It
right?
was pure concentration. It was a clear signal to the market that despite the high-profile failure in Alzheimer's, Biogen was committed to rare, high-impact neurological disorders, where they have proven market success and high pricing power.
Like with Spinraza.
Exactly. The $6.5 billion price tag ensured they solidified their position in this niche segment.
And the buying spree continued into 2024, still targeting specialized therapeutic areas.
Absolutely. In May 2024, they acquired Human Immunology Biosciences, or HI Bio, for $1.15 billion. This move was about reinforcing their pipeline with more monoclonal antibodies, the same kind of targeted technology that gave them RITUXAN and Tysabri.
It all connect back.
Yeah, iBio's assets complement Biogen's existing immunology work, which is essential for treating conditions like MS.
Finally, we see an acquisition focused purely on delivery technology, connecting directly back to their current successful rare disease treatments.
The September-November 2025 acquisition of Alcyone Therapeutics for $85 million.
Yeah.
While it's a smaller dollar amount, it was strategically crucial. Alcyone specializes in technology for spinal drug delivery.
And why is this so important?
Because treatments like Spinraza and many future CNS or central nervous system drugs must be delivered directly into the cerebrospinal fluid via spinal injection. Securing this proprietary delivery technology strengthens Biogen's long-term ability to administer their core neurological therapies safely and efficiently. It locks in a competitive edge.
These billion-dollar strategic bets required internal consolidation. In 2023, they cut a significant portion of their workforce.
The structural changes illustrate the brutal efficiency of the biotech sector. In July 2023, Biogen cut 1,000 jobs, representing 11% of its workforce.
That's a lot of people.
It is, and while painful, it was framed as a necessary measure to streamline operations, cut legacy costs, and ensure capital was fully focused on the new high-value launches and integrating the newly acquired assets.
At the same time, they announced a massive $2 billion investment in expanding manufacturing facilities.
In North Carolina's Research Triangle Park, yes. This contrast cost-cutting alongside huge capital investment shows a company retooling for efficiency and the long-term pipeline.
Now, we need to shift away from finance and strategy to two examples of operational turbulence that hit Biogen on a global scale. We have to start with the public health catastrophe linked to the company, the COVID-19 superspreader event.
This is one of the most astonishing unintended corporate consequences in recent history. The event occurred at the very start of the pandemic. On March 5, 2020, 3 attendees of a Biogen leadership conference held in Boston tested positive for COVID-19.
And because it was a global gathering of leadership, the virus was instantly launched into international travel networks.
It was an ideal vector for early global spread. By March 9, Massachusetts health officials had announced 30 new cases, all connected to that Biogen conference. But the true, horrifying scope only became clear much later through genomic sequencing and epidemiological modeling.
Wait, let me repeat these numbers because they are just staggering. The long-term tracking of that single corporate meeting is hard to believe.
It is truly shocking. Researchers painstakingly estimated that the virus lineage originating from that single Biogen conference would be linked to over 20,000 of Massachusetts' total cases.
20,000.
And internationally, the modeling estimated that the event was responsible for seeding up to 300,000 cases worldwide.
300,000.
Including approximately 1.6% of all U.S. COVID-19 cases in the early phases of the pandemic.
1.6% of all U.S. cases from one corporate gathering. That is an unbelievable, unintended public health impact that demonstrates just how quickly a globalized corporate structure can become an amplifier for infectious disease.
It serves as a monumental historical footnote, showing the profound responsibility, even unintended, that major global corporations carry beyond their core business.
Moving from an unforeseen public health crisis to a deeply ethical and legal one, we need to discuss the $900 million lawsuit settlement related to their core MS drug business.
This represents a significant ethical black mark for a company built on Nobel-winning science. In September 2022, Biogen agreed to a massive settlement, paying $900 million to the U.S. federal government, various states, and a whistleblower who brought the original suit.
What were the specific claims that led to this near-billion-dollar settlement?
The settlement resolved claims that Biogen had engaged in illegal, unethical sales practices between 2009 and 2014. Specifically, the company was accused of bribing doctors, paying kickbacks, to increase the prescription volume of its most profitable MS drugs.
Avonex, Tysabri, and Tecfidera.
The big three.
How exactly do these kickbacks influence prescription habits and inflate costs?
It's a violation of anti-kickback statutes because it introduces a commercial incentive, money, trips, expensive meals, speaking fees, into what should be a completely objective medical decision. The doctors are essentially compensated to steer patients toward the Biogen product, regardless of whether a generic or a competing, less expensive drug might have been medically equivalent.
And that artificially inflates drug costs.
Which are then borne by federal and state healthcare programs, leading to the massive civil penalty. The juxtaposition is just so stark. A company that provides these life-altering, revolutionary therapies was simultaneously utilizing fundamentally corrupt practices to boost the sales of those very same treatments.
Well, let's try to synthesize all of this.
Stepping back, Biogen is a quintessential high-stakes biotech enterprise. It began with the highest possible scientific pedigree, a foundation forged by Nobel laureates, and leveraged that credibility to pioneer treatments like Spinraza, which fundamentally altered the prognosis for children with SMA.
And they built an unassailable dominance in the massive MS market.
Despite the inherent risks like PML associated with Tysabri.
But this scientific excellence is inextricably linked to immense operational volatility. We've seen the calculated risk of acquiring Tysabri, the shocking financial failure of Aduhelm, the ethical fallout from the $900 million kickback settlement, and the completely unforeseen global impact of the COVID superspreader event.
It's a story of maximum innovation meeting maximum turbulence. Financially, they remain a powerhouse, rapidly pivoting their investment after the Aduhelm loss to reinforce their high-margin rare disease specialization, as we saw in the costly acquisitions of Reata and HI Bio.
Their strategic focus remains laser-sharp, solving the world's most difficult neurological problem.
Right.
And that focus on the biggest prize, Alzheimer's, didn't actually vanish when Aduhelm failed, did it? They learned lessons and immediately moved to the next generation of treatment.
That is the critical final piece of context. Biogen's collaboration with Eisai continued, yielding Alzheimer or Lecanemab ERM. This drug, which also targets amyloid beta, received U.S. approval in 2023.
And crucially, it was approved for patients in the mild cognitive impairment or mild dementia stages of Alzheimer's.
And the data supporting its efficacy was far clearer than Aduhelm's, allowing it to navigate a much less controversial path to market. It confirms that Biogen is not stepping away from this challenging therapeutic area.
Here's something to think about, given everything we've covered. The entire Aduhelm saga, the enormous investment, the contradictory clinical trials, the FDA overheading its advisory panel, and the ultimate commercial rejection. It provides a textbook case study.
It really does. It raises an important question about how society weighs the urgency of finding a cure for a universally feared condition like Alzheimer's against the certainty and solidity of clinical data.
The FDA's reliance on the accelerated approval pathway, in this case, forced a drug onto the market.
That the market itself, through insurers and practitioners, eventually rejected due to insufficient verified clinical benefit and prohibitive cost.
So what does that tell us about the future of drug development for catastrophic diseases?
Yeah.
It suggests that while accelerated approval can offer hope quickly, if the subsequent confirmatory data is weak, the entire regulatory and commercial system risks being destabilized.
Creating enormous financial cost and undermining public trust in the name of speed. It forces us to ask, should the standard for such urgent conditions be high-certainty data first or high-speed access? Biogen lived through the most expensive possible answer to that question.
A profound and challenging question for regulators, drug makers, and every patient hoping for a cure. Thank you for diving deep with us today.